This is a really troublesome opponent, Yuki thought, racking his brains. And the culprit behind this damage was the world's strongest warriors had been hit by a barrage of ultra-high density energy bombs created without regard for the consequences and had sustained considerable damage. The pseudo-void collapse in particular was extremely powerful, causing great destruction inside Habataki's body. His side, chest, back, and even his left arm was torn of, and he also lost his right leg. Habataki's forehead was split open, and magic essence like blood gushed out from it. But that's all. It looks terrible, but it's far from a fatal injury. In fact, by the time the dust cleared, all of the wounds had healed. Thus, Yuki and his friends' second major offensive to save the day ended in failure. However, that does not mean that there was no impact. Habataki's expression had changed from that of a no mask to one of rage. Why, you did it. Did you succeed in making him angry? You're an idiot. You're an idiot. It's good that the boss is being positive, but is that any consolation? Because they know each other well, they are merciless in their criticism. Moreover, this statement represented the feelings of everyone present. The point is, they are just keeping quiet because they have no alternative, so what? Good will it do to make them angry? It's not that Yuki is solely at fault, but it's true that the difficulty of defeating Habataki has increased, so it's not something to laugh about so easily. I even realized that Yuki is amazing just being able to laugh here. However, no one was discouraged. There was still energy left to tell and listen to jokes. The fact that Rimuru had returned gave hope and comfort to everyone. The group floats in the air, gazing at Habataki in the distance, trying to keep their presence hidden. Leaving Yuki alone, the strategy meeting began. There's definitely not enough firepower. That combined technique from earlier seemed to work, though. The pseudo-void collapse that Adalman and Gadra had collaborated on was certainly extremely effective. Even if it was only a few percent, it had managed to whittle down Habataki's stamina. However, it is doubtful whether this will work repeatedly. In this case, should we just engage in a melee and buy some time? Another option would be to wait for help to arrive, whether it be Rimuru-san or another monster. That's true. If Adalman and I challenge him and you can seal his teleportation, then it should be a pretty good fight. I'll help too. This was a positive opinion, but Elmesia opposed it. I wouldn't lose in terms of speed alone, but if I were to be targeted with that area attack just now, it would be the end. Hearing this, Sylvia was also at a loss for words. There was no warning whatsoever for Habataki's attack just now. It won't be like the fight against Milim. If she unleashes that attack, it will be impossible to avoid, and it will be an instant end. If Chloe were here, she would have given appropriate instructions, which was only natural since she could see the future, but Yuki was not very trustworthy. He just thought he was better than anyone else there. Bad guys. Well, we're probably the only ones who know how amazing the boss is. It can't be helped. Although Kagali tried to comfort him, if he couldn't give orders, he was not fit to be a leader. Yuki fully understood this, so he couldn't complain. Now, what should they do? Everyone was racking their brains. No good ideas can come up. Now that it was clear that even buying time would mean risking their lives, they could no longer resort to careless attacks on Habataki. That being said, time waits for no one. Everyone was in a meeting with accelerated thinking, but there was still little time left. If we do not establish a decisive policy, defeat awaits us. The conclusion I can come to is that sacrifice is unavoidable, but Yuki was about to say it when, Hey, it looks like you're in trouble. I'm glad you chose this. Carara came to this place. Then, when he saw the Habataki, he laughed arrogantly. Yuki also knows about Carara's existence. That said, I don't know that much about it. He is one of the Demon King's pillars, known as John and the original Yellow, and was named by Rimuru and became his subordinate. They were terrifyingly warlike and plunged the Imperial army into the depths of fear. That's about all the information we have. He seemed stronger than the people currently present, but if we were to compare him to Habataki, it seemed like they were all about the same. However, it's dangerous. Don't make that woman angry. Maria was so annoying and noisy. It seemed like there was no doubt that we should be wary of her. Moreover, even Almesia and Sylvia were looking at Yuuki and pleading with him. Don't make him angry. There's no way to cooperate with them. Don't try to appease them or take advantage of them. Just let them do as they please. Even though we weren't talking, I could clearly feel his feelings. How much is that? Yuuki was shocked by this. Carara was accompanied by a large number of subordinates. 200 members of the Black Corps, Black Numbers, have been freed from the ice sculptures, and they are led by Esprit. Well then, we'll just focus on the small fry. Yeah, I'll leave it to you. There are some Diablo supporters here, so be careful. Not to get into any fights. Ha ha ha, is that what Carara-sama said? Of course, I don't want to be scolded by my lord. I warned you, Carara said with a grin. Esprit realized that he was trying to push the responsibility onto her. So he decided to keep things quiet for now and quickly start working, dispersing his subordinates. Carara, who was left floating in the air alone, slowly turned around and met Yuuki's gaze. This is a dangerous thing, Yuuki instinctively realized. He instantly grasped Carara's character and knew she would never listen to orders. Rimuru-san is seriously amazing. To think that he can even get someone like this to obey him. Yuuki was deeply impressed. Carara asked Yuuki a question. So, surely there's no way to solve this. Well, there was some but. Unable to bring himself to say that it all had failed, Yuuki stammered. How pathetic, but are you still a man my lord approves of? The way Carara looked at Yuuki was like she was looking at filth. As proof of this, Carara's tone clearly conveyed feelings of exasperation and contempt. Okay, that's fine, say more. Even Maria was in agreement with Carara and was overjoyed in Yuuki's mind. Even Yuuki couldn't bear this. Yuuki was about to argue, but Carara added another opinion. Your opinion doesn't really matter. I'll help you, so be grateful. It was a spectacularly one-sided announcement. Carara then continued, giving an order. I'll take down that flying insect. So just bring it to me at the right time. It was an unreasonable request. Carara's subordinates were used to this, but it was a surprise to Yuuki. In the first place, Yuuki is not Carara's subordinate, so he has no obligation to follow orders. But however, Yuuki had no allies here. Hermesia and Sylvia were well aware of the danger Carara posed. They were the first to distance themselves from her, wisely not wanting to get involved. It seemed that Cagali and Tia had also sensed the danger, as they quickly disappeared. Even Laplace was pretending to be a stranger. As for Adalman and Gadra, since you are of the same rank as Saint Say Demon Maten II, Guardian Shoe Protector Go Kingu, wouldn't it be better to admonish Caradona? Ha 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 ha, Gadra's jokes are funny. Do you think Caradona would listen to the likes of me? Is that impossible? Well, I suppose. Only His Majesty Rimuru can command the originator. I was in a giving up mode from the start. Mai was the only one who seemed to be panicking, perhaps out of concern for Yuuki, but she was so unreliable that it was out of the question. Yuuki instantly grasped the situation and decided on a course of action. The correct thing to do is to wrap around something long. Okay, give me instructions. That's fine, just don't screw up. Saying this, Carara smiled broadly. As soon as Yuuki agreed, Carara descended to the ground. It seems that he has no intention of hiding and stands proudly in the middle of the hills that have turned into a desert. And then he screams, "Come on, Ajira." It is not a ritual to summon a demon. He simply called out to his subordinates, who would be on the battlefield. Naturally, the voice reached Ajira, who was traveling with the Dwarf King. "Gazelle. My goodness, Lady Carara has just been resurrected, yet she still seems intent on making me work hard. Heh, it must mean that they rely on you. Well then, King Gazelle, let's drink together again." "Yes, I'm looking forward to it. For that reason, we need to finish this battle quickly." Ajira and Gazelle laugh at each other. And with the speed of a gale, Ajira rushed to her master, Carara. "Sorry to keep you waiting, Lady Carara." "Yes, help me." As soon as Carara said this, she raised her right hand to the sky. "Understood." Ajira accepted the order. Then, as if praying, she activated her power, saying, "I am a blade, an immortal blade that will destroy the enemy." Ajira used her ultimate gift, Sword Body Soul Transformation, G, to transform into a golden sword, which was then sucked into Carara's right hand. And so, preparations were complete. Carara didn't seem to be worried about Ajira, instead focusing all her strength into her right hand. It was a suicidal stance, with no thought given to defense whatsoever. Seeing Carara like that, Yuki shuddered. "You've got to be kidding me, to be completely defenseless against an enemy with such dangerous attacks." Anyone could understand that this was a dangerous act that Yuki would never do. However, Carara calmly carried out the plan. Ajira, who entrusts her life to Carara and follows her, also seems to think that it is only natural. "You guys are crazy." I couldn't help but mutter this, but at the same time, I also thought this. I guess I must seem half-hearted to these guys, who are so determined. Well, it's funny to worry about the consequences when the world is about to end. Yuki laughed at himself. With Rimyuru's return, it felt like all of the problems had been resolved. Rimyuru would surely be able to do something about that Habataki. So, somewhere in the back of his mind, he had this thought: if he died here, it would be a waste of time. I guess I was thinking defensively before I knew it. Well, maybe that can't be helped. Yuki felt ashamed of himself for being like that. In order to ensure the operation was carried out reliably, he decided to trust Carara. "HMPH, you're really stupid. I won't forgive you for failing. I won't forgive you. Once you're dead, I won't be able to make fun of you anymore." "I know," Yuki said with a laugh. "I'll leave this to you." With these words to his comrades, Yuki teleported behind Carara. All strategies could be discussed through telepathy, but he did this to reduce the burden of coordinate calculations, even a little. "My follows suit. There's no other way. I'll cooperate." Saying this, he appeared next to Yuki. Carara wasn't surprised when she sensed the presence of the two behind her. As usual, he asked casually, looking behind him. "What do you mean? If you do your part, you'll be safe." "Ha ha ha, I like to look cool too. Besides, if I'm going to attract him, it's safer if I'm here." "Huff, that's the man you respect." Carara had predicted this would happen from the beginning. She would be completely defenseless, so in the worst-case scenario, she planned to have someone else do something about it. Understanding this, Yuki gave a wry smile. "I was tricked, but I didn't feel bad about it. Although we are impressed by their calculations, it is also a sign of their trust in us." Yuki felt a little excited at the trust he was being shown by someone who was not even an ally, but rather an enemy. Well then, let's get started. With that said, Yuki began to act. "If it comes down to it, I'll use my teleportation to evacuate both of you." Mai had also made up her mind. She had resigned herself to the fact that she only needed to focus on escaping. Thus began the final operation against Habataki. As Yuuki and Mai left the sky, the remaining people looked at each other. Everyone here was flying under their own power by some means. It was no longer safe to hide on the ground, so they remained on standby. If the boss has decided to die, then we have no choice but to go along with it. That's true. If I fail, that will be a story for later. Clayman and Footman will probably laugh at me in the other world, but I have to make sure I don't have any regrets. Laplace sometimes says good things. That's not true, Tia. I'm always the one with the best quotes, you know. As always, Laplace was joking around and lightening the mood. Everyone felt saved by him. Sylvia muttered with deep emotion. You really haven't changed at all. Well, I guess so. This makes Laplace feel awkward. Since I only recently remembered the memory, I couldn't say with confidence that nothing has changed, but on the other hand, it would also be funny to deny it. Don't get ahead of me this time. If we're going to die, let's die together. I understand. Okay then, I'll confuse him. Sylvia said with a smile. You're toying with me at lightning speed. In that case, let's go somewhere safer. With that, Elmesia joined the conversation. Afterwards, a simple strategy meeting was held using thought transmission. If you are hit by the flash of Habataki, it's the end. Since it would be difficult to avoid even with lightning speed, it's best to not let it be fired. Although things weren't going to go as smoothly as expected, Elmesia had decided that they could manage on their own if they were to buy themselves enough time until Carara was ready. It seems that he's not only using his eyesight, but also his magic perception. However, he still seems to be unfamiliar with combat. I think that's where we can exploit an opportunity. Here's Elmesia's plan. Sylvia and I would keep our distance and alternately release our fighting spirit. Habataki would then react. If he timed it well, he thought he might be able to cause confusion. You can hide your fighting spirit and aura like this. If you do that, maybe the opponent will mistakenly think you've teleported. Because I can do it, I get the illusion that the other person can do it too. It seemed quite possible. However, naturally, there will also be opposing opinions. Isn't that dangerous? They're visible, so will they just be killed one by one? That's right. It seems like they can see too, so I think they'll find out. Normally, visual information comprehension lags behind magic perception. This is why Elmesia had this opinion, but it could also be wishful thinking based on assumptions. If Habataki's eyesight was the result of his authority and was exceptional, he might easily see through it and the plan might fail. Laplace's point was based on this concern. Kagari had been silent up until this point, but now she finally spoke. In that case, I will use my ultimate bestowal, ultimate enchantment, Book of Prophecy, Agastya, to conceal all information about your existence. With that said, Kagali exercised her authority. The power of ultimate bestowal, ultimate enchantment, Book of Prophecy. Agastya governs phenomena related to information. Its basic power is to predict the near future a few seconds ahead, and its applied techniques also include deception and disguise. Although it cannot rewrite the information itself, it can make the target believe that for a short time. It can be used like an enhanced version of hypnosis, but it is useless as those with strong wills can resist it. However, if you have permission, it's a different story. As a result of Kagali using her powers, Sylvia and Elmesia disappeared. Or rather, they appeared to have disappeared. Amazing. I wouldn't be able to see Urwachan's current appearance unless I made full use of my authority. That's true. The two were impressed. Naturally, the others had the same reaction. Well then, I'll use my authority too. This time, Tyr activates ultimate bestowal ultimate enchantment. Orpheus. The optimistic player. Until now, it only worked on me, but it seems like it can be granted to other people too. The two who received the power were able to truly understand the meaning of Tia's words. Wow, I'm surprised. I feel like my strength has increased. But this thing seems to consume a lot of energy, so it looks like you'll need some skill to use it in actual combat. While Sylvia was surprised and happy at her strengthening, Elmesia's analysis was accurate. In fact, while their combat capabilities have increased several times, their ability to continue fighting has actually decreased. This is a natural consequence, as it is more exhausting than fighting at full strength. Are you okay? Laplace asked worriedly. In contrast, his wife and daughter were nonchalant about this. If we were to actually fight, it would actually get in the way. If all we want to do is make our presence known as a diversion, it's a good idea. So he laughed and answered that there was no problem. Thus, a diversionary tactic was also launched at the same time. Meanwhile, preparations for Carara are steadily progressing. With the bladed Agera at her side, Carara increased her fighting spirit and aura. And yet, it is tranquil. It may not have been an appropriate expression given the situation, but Carara's state with her eyes half closed was truly quiet and calm. The tension in his shoulders was gone. In fact, his whole body seemed to have relaxed. All of his energy was concentrated on just one point, the golden blade. In the silent atmosphere, the only sound was the beating of Yuki and Mai's hearts. Carara was fully aware of the battle situation. He is also listening to the thought transmissions shared by his allies and is aware of everyone's movements. Meanwhile, Tia's words caught my eye. The power to instantly increase combat ability was exactly what Carara was looking for. That's interesting. Give me that authority too. Without any hesitation, Carara called out to Tia. But this is... Don't worry about what happens later. We just need to defeat him. Tia looked anxious, but Carara didn't seem to mind. He believed only in his own victory and put all his efforts into increasing his chances of winning. Tia gave in and followed Carara's words. And so, everything was ready. I'm counting on you, Yuki Kagurazaka. It's an honor to have your name remembered. Yuki is also fully prepared. With Carara's signal, the operation could be carried out at any time. Do it. Okay. At that moment, Habataki, who had been toyed with by Sylvia and Elmesia, disappeared from the scene. At the same time, it appeared exactly as Carara had hoped, at the location she had specified. Yuki synchronized his consciousness with Carara's and responded to her request without the slightest deviation, making Habataki appear before her just as she had wished. The method was the same as when they had concentrated fire on Habataki earlier. If it had been used frequently, Habataki might have taken measures to counter it. But fortunately, Habataki was not on guard. He had the arrogance of being strong. What's more, Habataki was currently busy chasing Elmesia and the others, and was in a state of high anger. This was also fortunate, as he was easily caught in Yuki's magic. Before that, either way, it should have worked this time. This was because Yuki was performing the calculations with all his might. There was no way it wouldn't succeed. Yuki's resolve was clearly conveyed to Carara. Just as expected. It was a heartfelt praise that was simply not spoken aloud. And Carara would not let this opportunity go to waste. And a clear tone rang out in the silence. The golden blade was swung. It is the pinnacle of swordsmanship. Agera had dreamed of it, but had yet to realize it. It was the ideal culmination of Abaro Floreo. That was it. Kiwami technique, Flash Ninamata. Carara inherited all of Agera's experience and knowledge, and finally perfected The secret of the sword, that is, one-hit kill. It was the ultimate secret technique that ended everything with the first strike of a preemptive attack, which was also in line with the idea of no need for a second strike of Shinjai Genjen Ryu. The reason why Ajira hadn't mastered this technique was clear. He was always thinking about what would happen if it was blocked. Especially on the battlefield, there is not always just one enemy. Rather, techniques were honed assuming one-on-many opponents, so it could be said that betting everything on a single blow was taboo. Because their goals and directions were completely opposite, the ideal secret technique ended up being nothing more than a dream. However, Carara was different. I gave it my all and threw all other distractions aside and took on the challenge. If she were to fall, her comrades would take care of the rest. She had a slight feeling of that, but even more importantly, at the root of her mind was a very Carara-like thought. As long as I can kill the enemy in front of me, that's enough. And so the Kiwami technique, Flash Ninami, was perfected. And the result, the power of the technique was evident in the Habataki that was split in half from the top of the head. His heart had been neatly cut in half, and he had ascended without even understanding what had happened. That's wonderful, Lady Carara. I'm too lazy to reply. As Ajira praised her after her transformation was undone, Carara collapsed onto her back, looked up at the sky and cursed. I'll leave the rest to you. With that said, Carara fainted. It had given everything it had and gone into a dormant state. Understood. In response, Ajira picked up her sleeping master. Tears flowed like a waterfall from his eyes. Ajira was deeply moved to see her dream come true. And one more person. It's impressive. That is the pinnacle of the sword. The one who muttered this without thinking was King Gazelle himself, who was watching from above, ready to provide support if anything happened. The gazelles were also impressed. Witnessing the culmination of Aburo, Flow, and Dragon became a treasured memory for Gazelle's entire life. That excitement makes Gazelle stronger. Everyone, this is still a situation where we cannot let our guard down. Attack with caution. He gave a speech to his subordinates to inspire them and began a full force support attack to ensure that Carara and the others could return safely to the safety zone. By the way, there are 2 more people. There's no way anyone could imitate that, right? I can't do that. Right, we're in the middle of the battlefield. Normally, you'd want to conserve your strength and prepare for the next enemy. Misery and Rain nodded to each other. Seeing Carara's crazy actions, they had no choice but to admit that it was something they could never do. That's how abnormal Carara is. There is a saying that goes, don't think about the consequences, but normally, people would think about it a little. If he had even had the slightest doubt, the tip of his sword would have dulled and the Flash Ninami would have ended in failure. Therefore, this secret technique was an illusory technique, and the possibility of it ever being realized was almost zero. Moreover, this was right in the middle of the battlefield. Considering the time and place, it was one of the worst possible moments. And yet, Carara accomplished it. The 2 are unsure whether this should be surprising or something to be praised. Carara really has a broken head. Rain muttered with deep emotion. Misery also wholeheartedly agrees. I agree. Let's be glad that we're not enemies. The 2 nodded vigorously to each other, thinking that it was only natural for Carara to do so. He was relieved that they were now on his side, and vowed to himself that he would try to avoid hostility as much as possible in the future. In the 3 directions excluding the east, the 3 servants of Ivaraj, Destruction, World, Dragon were defeated. It all happened at almost the same time, as if by design. Most of those who knew this thought so. All that remains is Ivalage. However, the reality was not so sweet. Let's go back in time a little. Loud shocks were heard repeatedly in the Great Hall, inside Tensukaku. This is the effect of the battle between Milim and Ivalage. As a result, the successors of the cryptids, the mythical beasts that had been attacking the surface, were annihilated one after another, without leaving a single speck behind. It was just as Milim had planned. The plan was to minimize the impact on the ground while defeating the remaining enemies. It worked, and the only enemy inside Tensukaku was the Destroyer Me World. Kai Dragonryu, Ivarage. However, what happens next is unexpected. Milim and Ivalage were fighting on equal terms, or so it seemed. However, anyone who looks closely will notice that there is a huge gap. Yes, like Chloe. This isn't good. Milim's current strength is unimaginable, but it's not as strong as rampaging madness, stampede. At this rate, I'll be overwhelmed. Chloe was worried about this, and her fears were confirmed. Kyaha. Although Ivalage had grown to the physique of an adult woman, her behavior had not changed. She seemed to be innocently enjoying the fight without a trace of sadness or even greed for victory, as she continued to exchange blows with Milim. Fighting is fun. Although there was a difference in skill and level at first, Ivalage didn't flinch, didn't back down, and didn't retreat even when hit. She always moved forward and began to respond to Milim's attacks. I have a feeling this is going to be bad. Milim, like Chloe, instinctively knew this. Milim was currently clad in jet black armor. A beautiful crimson horn sprouted from her forehead, revealing her true form as a dragonoid. However, they had not summoned any heavenly demons or asuras. They were fighting with their bare hands. If Milim was in serious mode, she could easily defeat a normal opponent. However, Ivalage was not an easy opponent to subdue with just her fists. No, on the contrary. Why didn't Milim draw her sword?